Great. Good afternoon to you all. We have an exciting panel for a few moments. I get a chance to talk to two leaders in our industry, Jarvis Sam and Tony Profit, who I think you'll really enjoy. My name is Gerald Chertavian. I'm the founder and CEO of Year Up. But before we get into it, I want to ask Tony and then Jarvis, first of all, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and tell me why you do it.
Well, I'm Tony Profit, and I'm the Chief Quality Officer for Salesforce, and I lead Salesforce's equality initiatives, really focused on gender equality, LGBTQ equality, and racial equality, among other things. And formerly, I spent time with Microsoft and HP, and worked in the education business at Microsoft. So I have a lot of passion for the education technology and all the amazing things that the folks in the room are doing it. And so why I do this is just a personal passion for equality. And it's been something that's been a vector for me in my career from my time in HP and leading the operations there and trying to focus on equality for the people that worked in the supply chain of HP, as well as the impact on the planet, or focus on issues like conflict minerals through my time at Microsoft and now. And so it's been a perfect time for me to really zero in and focus day in and day out on equality, and it's a personal passion, both as in my spare time and the way I invest my personal time and volunteering, as well as my professional time now.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Tony, for getting us started. Jarvis.
My name is Jarvis Sam. I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Manager over at Snap. In that role, I work cross-functionally with our talent acquisition team and our HR team on how we go about engaging and, along the way, acquiring diverse talent, as well as what their experience looks like once they're actually on site at Snap. So this is going from a candidate engagement or candidate experience perspective all the way through their tenure as an employee. In terms of what that looks like in the grand scheme, I work alongside several of our different teams from comp and benefits to understand some of the issues that diverse communities continue to face as they enter the workplace, particularly in the tech industry. I've been involved in this space for about 5 years now. Prior to Snap, I spent a tenure over at Google, and then just before that, I was at Deloitte Consulting on the strategy side. In terms of why I do what I do, the idea of diversity is one that represents all of our reality, from the moment we wake up to the media that we choose to take in to the social media platforms that we choose to utilize. Diversity represents our reality, whereas inclusion is the choice that we make to provide a space and opportunity for others to ensure advancement and success in their own potential. So through community engagement, both in my personal life as well as through the company, as well as what our engagement with our staff looks like, it's something that continuously motivates me.
Great. Thank you very much, Jarvis. Now, you guys are at opposite ends or broader ends of a spectrum of companies. Sure. Right? You have a massive organization, Salesforce, obviously one of the leaders in this space, and just fantastic organization. You have Snap growing probably at wildly egregious rates, 160 million users, but relatively new in the social media space. Let me start, Tony, with you. At Salesforce, we've talked about ushering in the age of equality. What does that mean to Salesforce? How do you think about it? How should we think about it? Is it changing as you look out into the future?
Right, great question. And so at Salesforce, one of the amazing things about the company is that a corporation can be a platform for good. And that the idea, even back to the founding of the company, with this model we call 1-1-1, where we contribute 1% of the product, 1% of the employee's time, 1% of the capital. At the founding of the company, we're focused on doing good in society. And so these are the core values of the company, and equality is a principal dimension of that. And so with a focus on equality, we think about it in these ways. We focus on equal access to education is a critical one for us. We focus on equal rights, and particularly an emphasis on LGBTQ equality and the stands that we've taken in states like Indiana and states like Georgia and states like North Carolina have been one of the principal ways that we have embodied that focus on equal rights. We focus on equal pay, and that's a core dimension of gender equality and equal pay for equal work regardless of gender. And so one of the things that the company has done and tried to be a leader and tried to encourage other companies to do as well, and other companies in our ecosystem and partners and companies at large, is to take a look at gender equality measured by pay. And so we audited in 2015 and 2016 the pay of every employee on the planet for parity and equity based on gender, and found a difference and invested $3 million to make it whole. And again, did the same thing this last annual cycle And we had 7,000 new employees in the company, and again, found a difference, and again, invested $3 million to make it whole and make sure that we could be standing on firm ground and say that there's equality for equal pay for equal work based on gender throughout the company across the world. Then finally, we're focused on the workplace and diversity, and I like the way that Jarvis defined it, and inclusion. We think about it similarly, and just making sure that the workplace that we have, the workforce that we have, it represents the communities where we serve and operate. It represents our partners. It represents our customers. And so it should feel seamless when you walk out of a Salesforce building anywhere in the world. The people in the building should look like the people outside of the building. And we should have a culture that's inclusive, where everyone feels seen and everyone feels valued and everyone feels heard, and nobody feels invisible, or they have to check some fraction of their identity at the door for fear of judgment or discrimination.
Yes, follow-up. You've worked in other large organizations. Do you see things differently as you look out? If you compare 10, 20 years ago, I don't want to presuppose I know how long you've been in the workforce, but a few decades. Do you see things differently today? Do you think our leaders are thinking differently? Why is the imperative greater now than it was perhaps in the past?
Yeah, I do see, I can speak for Salesforce, and this focus on being a platform for change and a platform for social good. Now that's nearly 2 decades old, because the company was founded 18 years ago. And so, say, is that a near-term change? No, it's not. I think it's becoming more acute. You think of some of the tensions that we have, or places where we see a lack of progress in society. I think it's becoming more acute. And I think for all of us, I think the thing that's going to make this, particularly acute is the rate of change of technology, and how quickly technology is changing. And the McKinsey thesis I thought was great, and the implications of technology for what employable skills look like today, 5, 10, 15 years from now, so that the kids that are in kindergarten today, what skills should they be learning? And one of the things that's really reshaping the entire workplace is going to be artificial intelligence, and AI is going to fundamentally redefine what is a job, what is value-added productive work for a human 5 or 10 years from now as AI becomes more pervasive. So these are some of the things that are shaping our worldview. I think it makes it particularly important that we are focusing our efforts to make sure that the current generations of kids are not going to be left behind because they're not getting the right skills today for what the workplace will look like 10 or 15 years from now when they enter the workforce.
So, Jarvis, how you're managing recruitment in and around diversity at Snap, how are you experiencing this? How do you think about also your user base, which is an incredibly diverse user base? How is that factoring into how you're thinking about what you're building, what's hard about it, what's going better than you thought? Give us some insight into that.
Absolutely. So to add a couple of points of contextualization, Snap, or Snapchat as an application, is about 5 years old with over 160 million daily active users. The unique part about that, though, is about 70% of those users are between ages 13 to 34. So some of the challenges that we look at have to be evaluated on, namely, a bilateral layer. We have to consider both how our workforce makeup is diverse, but also how that impacts our users. So if you consider that demographic particularly, the 13 to 34 generation, our millennials, are unapologetically very interested in the concepts of diversity and inclusion and ensuring that the companies that are making the products that they're utilizing are doing good in that space. Specifically, if you take a look at how we're framing this, particularly around product design as well as content, those are areas where we can continue to leverage what diversity and inclusion looks like in that space. Take, for example, it's no big secret that Snap is continuing to enter into the original shows space from a content perspective. Given the demographic of our users and the makeup, considering that the application also tends to serve about 51% to 49% women to men, that ratio needs to make sure that from a content perspective and from a product design perspective, that we are focusing on how those demographics are engaging with the product or platform. The best way to do this, though, is to focus on the staff that's functionally and formally working on that product. So a couple of areas that we're doing that's very different from industry is we actually integrate our diversity program through talent acquisition. So it all starts with the pipeline that's being generated to who's actually working on the product or platform. So from attending diversity conferences on the programmatic infrastructure side to actually developing innovative platforms on our own where we're bringing together different communities, either communities of color or women or underrepresented minorities within the space to actually work on the product, then we can see over time what that expansion success can look like. The way you then measure this, though, is look at what that interaction looks like with the user, particularly from a user engagement standpoint. There's been a lot of articles released recently that highlight Black teens, for example, particularly in the United States, are very active on Snapchat and Instagram. Understanding what that means from a content perspective in terms of what we feature on our Discover profile from our publishers to how we then utilize content in the original shows, our original content space, is crucial.
And are you getting the talent you need? What are you learning most that might be applicable for the wider audience as you're pushing hard to this? Is clearly a business imperative, given the diversity of your user base. What's been easiest, hardest, and what are you learning that might be relevant for this group?
Yeah, I'll start with the challenges. You know, we hear a lot in media about some of the challenges facing Silicon Valley. Snap is actually in Venice, California. So we're a Southern California-based company. And so starting the burgeoning Silicon Beach is where we exist. So one of the challenges that exists there is this idea of relocating talent from the Bay Area and from Seattle, where there are these huge tech hubs, people that have the talent and historical background and understanding on how to execute against product. However, the implication to this, and one of the ways that we've seen to resolve this, is understand what the talent marketplace looks like in Los Angeles and within Southern California. And if the talent's not there, find unique and key ways to build, grow, and subsequently develop that talent over time. When you look to the diverse space, particularly, if you take a look at the Silicon Valley, largely among communities of color, they tend to have this perspective of networking within their own regions or within specific areas. For the Los Angeles community, given how diverse it is as a space and how sprawling it is as a city, this creates its own set of challenges with how we go about engaging diverse communities. So launching programs in cities where we know that there is a huge diverse population in the tech space has allowed us to be really successful. So you'll see continued growth around San Francisco, New York, and Seattle for us.
And one thing we hear a lot, and I'm sure many folks in this room will be familiar, is that post-secondary leaders will say, vast majority, we're preparing folks to meet the needs of industry. And you go to business people and say, actually, folks coming out of post-secondary aren't equipped to meet the needs we have in industry. It's kind of a 80% percentage point difference. And 90% of post-secondary leaders say we're preparing folks who are going to meet your needs. 11% of business leaders say that's correct. So there's a huge mismatch in is talent being educated in such a way that it's meeting the needs of industry, and then you layer on top of that, are we actually seeing all talent in a diverse and inclusive manner? How do you look at that, Tony, as you look out? What's Salesforce's role in that?
Sure. Well, for all tech companies, it is a battle for talent, and innovation is driven from having diverse groups of people, smart people putting their minds against a business challenge or an opportunity. And so, talent is absolutely essential. And if you think about the pipeline, the traditional pipeline that people think about is people coming out of computer science degrees from four-year universities, and that's a great pool of talent, but we're looking to expand it in other non-traditional ways. So the partnership, for example, that we have with you in Europe, so Europe and Salesforce have been partners for a while, and it's been a great partnership. It's really just beginning, but the idea of the notion that you don't necessarily need to have a four-year computer science degree from a leading university to work in technology, we're proving that out by the amazing interns that you partner with us and other people in tech and across industries. I know you partner across industries, Gerald. And so I think that's one important way. So, but at Salesforce, we're thinking also more broadly about the notion of what's that economy that Salesforce is affecting. And we've spent some time with partners, IDC as a partner, we spent some time studying that, and the notion that by 2020, that Salesforce economy broadly, us and our partners in ecosystem will create about $389 billion of effective GDP. That by 2020, that the Salesforce economy will create 1.9 million jobs. And so now we're thinking that would deplete, obviously, many of the graduating classes from any of these great universities around the world, not just in the US. So now our focus is shifting, and it has been for about 2 years, to how can we, Salesforce, actively participate in generating the talent that will feed the Salesforce economy, right? And so we've created a platform, and that platform is called Trailhead. And if you go to trailhead.salesforce.com, literally you can go to it on your phone and you can see it. And the notion of the Trailhead platform is to find a fun, easy, free learning platform to grow people and bring them into the Salesforce economy. Right now, today, more or less precisely today, right? But more or less, there's about 300,000 jobs in the Salesforce economy. Indeed kind of did this study that just came out recently about the top 10 kind of best jobs and based on potential and salary growth and open postings. And 2 of the top 10 jobs, I mean, many of them were generic, like IT developer or full stack developer, but 2 were specific, right? Salesforce admin, Salesforce developer were 2 of the top 10 jobs with company-specific monikers to them. So our challenge now to continue to grow our platform and continue to grow our economy and our ecosystem and to better serve our customers, to have better customer outcomes, is to create that learning platform and to leverage it. And that is, for us, that is Trailhead, which has about 300,000 active users. And people have earned over, we call the badges, it's gamified, it's fun, you know, over 2 million badges have been earned on the Trailhead platform.
So we saw it over the past years, Howard Schultz at Starbucks took an interesting view of the ecosystem at Starbucks and said our supply chain is having trouble hiring the number of people they need to hire to keep up with the growth of our organization. And they made a commitment to get involved in actually bringing opportunity youth into that pipeline in helping and enabling their suppliers to actually access different pools of talent. So they took a very expansive view of how to support the ecosystem to look broadly at talent and specifically around groups that hadn't been either represented or had access and opportunity. Do you see Salesforce's role as similar in terms of helping that ecosystem to not only to fill jobs, but to fill them in ways that actually ensure that all talent has opportunity and access?
No, it's absolutely, because one of the beautiful things about the Trailhead platform, I'm just giving that as one example of one company. I mean, obviously there's many, many great companies, you know, and big platforms out there represented. They each have their own strategies that are doing great things for society, but, you know, I'm talking about the Salesforce platform now. And so one of the great things about it is there's limited prerequisites. And so we have people in the platform from literally every walk of life and that are reinventing their careers or beginning their careers anew for the first time, that can just simply go through and get certified. Again, the McKinsey thesis of the companies being the certifying agent, and that someone becomes certified on the Salesforce platform, and that's an employable skill, again, which we said there's 300,000 job openings for. So we see that as really, that we are an essential part of that, and that we're taking leadership and exercising that leadership, again, for the good of our customers. So it's for the good of the customers, for the good of all of the stakeholders around the company. The other thing that's happening simultaneously, and you know, at Salesforce, I report directly to Mark Benioff, and one of the things I'm learning is he clearly thinks big. And so he has a new vision for the notion of having 500 apprentices, you know, 5 million, thank you, 5 million apprentices across the U.S. with a multi-company national coalition to drive this thinking big of driving, you know, 5 million apprentices. And so we're thinking about our role in that and how we can be a role more broadly for the tech industry and other industries to drive to this 5 million apprentice notion.
It's a bold vision, and certainly I would argue, given the work I'm in, for sure, that this country needs that, knowing that as business leaders who probably will champion this as much as nonprofit folks like myself. So it's been a very interesting partnership. I do want to compliment both of you. Both Snap and Salesforce have been partners to the organization I run, which is working with low-income 18 to 24-year-olds, and in 1 year enabling them to go from either low or no income to a professional career with Snap, with Salesforce, with 250 large companies across the country. Our population is 100% low income, 98% of color. And Salesforce has been one of the leading companies now, probably a decade, of actually saying it's not about, it's about your competency, not just your credential. It's about your professionalism, not just your pedigree, and actually broadening the lens and the aperture at how you see human beings and their talent. And that leads the way, which is fantastic. And Snap, just recently, I saw the character and culture of your organization supporting someone who went through a tough time, and it was amazing. Both gentlemen meet with the folks who come through year up regularly. Tony, I know, is meeting in a short period of time with 30, 40 interns. To me, it's incredible to see how you're leading others towards this space. Yeah, sure.
So I love the Europe model, and I just want to acknowledge you and applaud you for what you're doing in your leadership here and your passion for this. Right? And Gerald, he's too modest to say this, but he's dedicated the last 17 years of his life to this cause and making a difference for these youth. And it's phenomenal in your persistence and accomplishment. And we're a beneficiary of that. And you know, it may feel like philanthropy or sound like it, but it's not, because we need that talent. You know, we have a real lack of talent, and the idea that you're creating this talent, you know, it creates, you know, a duality of the benefit of both. We're doing the right thing for society, but it's a great thing for business outcomes. So I definitely want to applaud and compliment you on your service.
Thank you. Kind of you to say. We feel fortunate to do the work we do and work with leaders who actually recognize we can't have 1 out of 5 young people out of the economic mainstream. 1 out of 5 young people of color are out of the economic mainstream in this country. You can't have a civil society or democracy if you're marginalizing that many young people. And last time I checked, talent is distributed evenly across all human beings. Unfortunately, opportunity isn't. So thank you for recognizing that. Jarvis, as you look out, so you're how many years into this now at Snap?
Snapchat's 5 years old. We've been working on the diversity and inclusion effort for about 18 months now.
Right. And where's it heading? What's 10, 20 years out going to look like? I'd love you both to kind of help us see, what are you seeing, given the commitment you've made here, and broadly to talent, what are you seeing as you look out?
So over at Snap, we've done a case study of several different companies across CPG, retail, tons of different industries. And what we found is that as they start to integrate diversity and inclusion programs, many of them at the most basic level don't even launch employee resource groups or diversity resource groups until they're almost 20 plus years into their tenure. For Snap, we've seen the advent of diversity resource groups ever since year 3, and I found this to be incredibly successful. Organized across a 4-pronged framework of community engagement, professional development, internal engagement, and diversity recruiting, these resource groups not only act as a place for diverse communities to come together and highlight some of the challenges that they encounter as workplace professionals at Snap, but also how Snap can engage the local community of Venice and more broadly in general communities that we serve across geographies. Over the next 10 to 20 years, you'll continue to see this framework expand pretty significantly, as these groups not only represent an internally facing function, but also a group that creates a unique home place to talk about some of these issues and challenges, but also change policy within the company, as well as how the product and content is facing the external community. From there, we also this year launched what we call Snap Inclusion Training. It's our take on the traditional unconscious bias training. For us, we don't want to put in place ideas that might conflict. For example, the idea of removing a name from a resume. That's something that Snap doesn't see as culturally unique. If we're going to invest a significant amount of resources in putting our staff through unconscious bias training, then we want to present them an opportunity to check these biases consistently and continuously. By providing this type of experimental and experiential approach, then our staff can engage on face what the idea of inclusion looks like. By putting them in a position to discuss ideas of equality, inclusion, and belonging over the next 10 years, then you'll continue to see a culture develop around those issues. Now, Snap more traditionally upholds the values of being kind, smart, and creative. For a company built entirely on the ideas of innovation and leveraging ephemeral messaging as a platform for a functional camera application, the ideas of the thoughts and creativity that we choose to engage and subsequently express also have to be revealed and highlighted within our workforce. By creating a platform where people feel included and actually want to highlight this perspective, then we'll be continuously doing analysis to figure out how to improve what our company culture looks like, but try to develop and showcase that Silicon Beach can overcome a lot of the same challenges that the Valley's faced for the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. So I would say, Gerald, where I see this heading is that the requisite skills for the workplace are changing at an increasing rate of speed. And I think for the education technology industry, which is largely represented in the room, for the technology industry, which is on the vanguard of reshaping many dimensions of society, that we have an obligation, a responsibility, an opportunity to be part of making sure that both the current generation of folks in terms of reskilling and that the next generation of young people in terms of getting those basic skills. I mean, you think about the notion of what should be taught in school, and it's morphing, into the 4 C's and creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, versus the traditional kind of reading, writing, and arithmetic, thinking about it. I mean, that's a challenge for the folks in the room. Salesforce acknowledges its part in that challenge, and we really double down on K-12 education, deep partnership with the San Francisco Unified School District, deep partnership with the Oakland Unified School District, and 45 other schools around the world in the program we call Circle the Schools. And so the notion of investing in the future, making sure that the next generation has the right requisite skills, focusing on that mid-tier of the pipeline where you are, Gerald, and then finding people with non-traditional backgrounds that don't necessarily have a 4-year computer science degree, and finding them a way, because they're great people with great intellects, to get them into the workplace and get maybe some on-the-job training, some distance learning, digital platform training, to become a productive part of the workforce, because they're brilliant, we're finding brilliant young people. I have one on my team, you know, Marcus from my team, and amazing. He's just one person of the many hundreds that you place. And so I see the future being very much about the tech industry and the ed tech industry standing up and making a difference, and anticipating the skills of the future, because those are going to be dramatically reshaped by artificial intelligence and some of the more routine jobs and repetitive jobs, whether it's a manufacturing job or a customer service job. Many of those jobs are going to go away, and they're going to be replaced by intelligent bots or literally by robots. And so we have to all be about now preparing this next generation of youth for that workplace of 2025, 2030.
I'll tell one story. Hopefully Tony will mind. I was in Palo Alto last week presenting to a group of well-heeled philanthropists, some of the world's richest people. And I brought in a young lady from Salesforce. And she said, you know, I'm from Oakland, and I was a 16-year-old single mother. And she said, what I want to do is help you understand the context, right? Because so many young people have a bounded rationality within which they're growing up, right? She said, there wasn't a person around me that I knew, spoke to, grew up with, who could even begin to tell me what a career would look like in the field called technology. I didn't have the role models. I knew I was smart. I just didn't even see how to put my gears into first. She's been at Salesforce 3 years. That child is now coming to 9 years old. She makes $125,000 a year in cybersecurity, working for Salesforce.
And did she have a 4-year computer science degree?
No, nope. And she was telling the story, and this is where it gets even more interesting. Her 9-year-old was sitting in the car seat next to her, and she said, you know, Salesforce keeps me busy. I'm on the phone. I'm doing conference calls. I had to pick him up from school. And he said, Mommy, what are you talking about? All these words and technology and threats and cyber. And she was telling him about technology, and she said, you know, son, the richest and youngest billionaire in the world is a gentleman, Mark Zuckerberg, who got into technology, computers. And she said now her 9-year-old's biggest aspiration, which she's now secured because she makes good income, is he's going to coding camp this summer, right, as a 9-year-old boy. Now, if I look at the statistical chances of a 16-year-old single mother from Oakland, right, making plus 6 figures, actually enabling her child from day one to see a different outlook of where that young boy can head. She also told the audience she drives a Mercedes. She says, it's got a lot to maintain these things, but I drive my Merc. Said, I don't know if it's as good as they said. And you have to think that the statistical chances of that, if we look at society today, were like, you know, 0.0 something. And the fact is that shouldn't be a miracle. It shouldn't be something we think, wow. We should say it's humbling that there's probably so many more young people out there who just need opportunity, right? And that we in the room have to think also, what is our role in inclusion, in diversity, in widening the apertures, who gets in the door, right? And I think it's, you know, it's remarkable that this shouldn't be miraculous work. It should be almost embarrassing to us that it didn't take that much to help Keontae have a salary in a way that she could take good care of her son and give him a great advantage.
Right, and this is not just the right thing to do. I mean, for the folks in the educational technology, ed tech world,
Right.
there's huge business opportunities out there. And you think about the scale platforms that can now be served up from the cloud in pretty much in any language, you know, in any location, you know, anywhere in the world. These are huge opportunities for the folks in this room. You think about some of the platforms where people are learning in code.org and Code 2040 and Black Girls Code. For us, it's trailhead.salesforce.com. I mean, these are amazing things that don't require, you know, a building or a big capital investment. It can all be served up from the cloud. So I think this is a great, obvious space, and I know many in the audience are focused on this, and I would just encourage you to double down on it.
So, gentlemen, we'll open up for questions in just a moment. Are you hopeful? Are you, if you are concerned about any areas, what do you think about at night when you try to think about growing the best organizations, the best ecosystems, ones that actually look at all talent? How do you sit here today, Jarvis?
Very hopeful. I think with what the industry's building and a lot of the pipeline focus is crucial, particularly when you look at the K-12 education space. The more that we encourage and incentivize youth to highlight and understand what tech opportunities look like. And this is both on the STEM education side and outside of STEM education. Understanding that the technology space is indeed an ecosystem. There are tons of jobs in legal, finance, recruiting For people in the tech space, understanding that you don't have to have that 4-year computer science degree to truly be a successful tech professional. I think shifting that narrative is really where we want to go. And once we've deployed that, particularly in the K-12 education space, then we can start seeing some successes and some strides there. Some of the challenges, though, are what continue to keep me up at night, is understanding that we do a lot of work in that space, so building a pipeline that's there, while neglecting the fact that there are a multitude of students at the community college layer or at junior colleges who, with the right amount of tooling and redefining of what our job descriptions look like, could go on to be incredible employees. Take the work Europe is doing, for example. By investing a significant amount of resources at the K-12 layer, we're doing really great and exciting work that's going to meet a significant business need over time. However, it's leaving unchecked and unbalanced a group that already has a significant amount of potential today. By reevaluating how we look to credentials and perspective and the objectivity that exists within our job descriptions and reevaluating that framework will allow us to carefully capture the group that's currently in need and that we could offer potential opportunity to. So once we reevaluate what that narrative looks like with our leaders and then with our middle line managers, then we can see a huge shift in focus.
Jarvis, you talked about practices that, and even year up in our early days, we did this until we realized how horrified we were. We actually weren't even eating our own cooking. If you say 4-year degree required on a job description, you exclude 86% of Latinos and about 79–80% of African Americans in the United States. And one would argue that HR is actually not set out with the stated purpose of actually excluding 86% and 80% of Latinos and African Americans respectively. But that actually is what happens. The practice of how we think about what the filters are, which and what are those based on truly? So a simple thing like that, and even year up in the first early years, we said, why did we think we would even say that? And we took it off all of our job postings. We may say preferred, but not required. You can still apply and show us who you are. So you're hopeful?
Yeah. I'd say I'm broadly hopeful. When I see the potential impact that these digital learning platforms can have, and that all you need is access to a technology device, a simple smartphone, and to the network, that makes me incredibly hopeful. You know, when I see the impact that Hour of Code can have, and you know, a young person could be in kindergarten or the first grade, you know, engaging with digital technology and coding for the first time, and you know, the spark in their eye when they get it, you know, and it's not syntax. Obviously, it's block-based coding, and they get it, and it's intuitive to them, and that you see how those seeds are planted and how deeply they can become rooted. That leaves me very hopeful. What has me concerned is the access to technology and those gaps that are emerging. Certainly in this country, you know, we see that, and we're, you know, in certain locations and certain socioeconomic strata, you don't even necessarily even have access to the internet at home. You don't necessarily have access to a technology device. That's worrisome. And then you think globally, and you think about the parts of the world where, for example, young women are not encouraged even to go to secondary education, right? Or you know, there's societal pressures or social norms that prevent that. That's wrong, right? And that needs to be fixed. You think about those parts of the world where there's conflict, and you think about all the hundreds of thousands, literally millions of young people that are growing up in refugee camps or in transitional, transient kind of situations that, you know, don't have access to basic education, much less access to a technology platform. You know, that's worrisome. And those are some of the challenges. I mean, these brilliant people that are sitting here in this room. You know, there's more than enough intellect in this room, in my view, to take the power of technology and platform and networking and lower cost Moore's Law and combining that with the power of AI and go against those challenges and figure out how you serve, you know, those young people and that don't have access to technology. How do you get them technology? How do you serve those young women that are being denied a right in many countries, being denied a right to just basically to education? You know, take that up as a personal cause, as a societal cause, and as a technology cause. You know, think about it. It's the right thing to do. Think about it as a business opportunity. You know, obviously that carries back, you know, back to the U.S. where that access to technology is also lacking. If you can get technology in the hands of young people, it's transformative. It doesn't necessarily have to be a classroom experience. It certainly doesn't have to be a 4-year, you know, degree from a leading institution in computer science.
First of all, thank you both. It's a pleasure to both to know both of you and to listen to you speak, but also to know how you're trying to lead broadly. You know, I think about what's leadership look like in the 21st century. And I would argue that if companies don't become increasingly culturally competent writ large, it'll be impossible to lead. So leaders are going to have to put themselves on a learning path and even ask themselves what don't they don't know about areas here that are pretty broad. Let me stop there for a second, see if folks have any questions that you'd like to ask of our panelists. We have a couple minutes for questions, and then we'll close up. Yes, and we have a microphone right here for you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Quick question for you. It's one thing to recruit top talent. How do you then maintain that once top talent of color or of gender gets into a specific position, that you're maintaining that system to allow for them to feel included? Because it's one thing to really attract great talent, but when you realize that they may be the only, how do you then continue that conversation so that you retain that talent and that talent also attracts other talent so we can have a great workforce?
Yeah, I think Jarvis hit on it, and I'll double down on it. Whether you call it an affinity group or an employee resource group, I mean, that's one of the principal ways of creating a sense of community to where people who are of whatever demographic, I'll pick my own, if you're black at Salesforce, we have an ERG focused on blacks, it's called Bold Force. And so you have this notion of an affinity group that you feel nurtured and you're around people that share a common interest, but there's a duality to it because you also want to be included. So that affinity group also becomes a magnet for allies. And the notion of being an ally, so anyone who's a member of the majority, whatever that happens to be in any culture, it's different in every country, right? But anyone a member of the majority, there's an opportunity, I would argue it's an obligation to be an ally to all of the other people that are in your family of your company. And so we use the affinity groups, we call them Ohana groups, and that's the Hawaiian word for extended family, right, at Salesforce. We use the Ohana groups to create that sense of community and also to be a magnet to pull in allies to become sponsors and advocates and mentors and friends and colleagues.